It's MonsterVerse, baby.
If we are to define the MonsterVerse by similar phases to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, then 2021's Godzilla vs. Kong brought Phase 1 to an end. The unified story the MonsterVerse had been telling from entry to entry that was slowly and ominously barreling towards the Clash of the Titans finally came to pass. But due to the ongoing success of the franchise, Legendary wanted to see it continue. While a few projects that were already in the works, such as what became Monarch Legacy of Monsters, were shuffled around and transformed into their final iteration, one project quietly moved through the stages of production until it was released almost without notice. This small-scaled adventure was Skull Island, an animated series that serves as something of a distant sequel to 2017's Kong Skull Island and can be considered the official start to Phase 2 of the MonsterVerse. The story begins in summer of 1992 or 1993. Small-time independent monster hunters Hero and Cap, along with their kids Mike and Charlie, sail the world in search of a strange luminescent dragon that Cap saw decades earlier. Their goal of trying to prove that monsters exist isn't a very lucrative one, leading Hero and Mike to make a deal with a woman named Irene to find an island she's been searching for. This brings them to an old GI who warns them about Skull Island, an island his squadron was brought to in the early 1970s, only to all perish at the hands of horrible creatures that they were warned to never again speak of. The GI sells them a chart that should bring them to where the island is, and they're off. As they approach, they rescue a young girl, Annie, from the ocean after she fled a ship full of armed guards who are after her. The ship soon disappears in a storm, and the Once Upon a Maritime is sunk by a sea monster who kills Hero and most of the crew, leaving the survivors shipwrecked on Skull Island. The next morning, Mike and Charlie unite with Annie, while Cap meets Irene, who he follows to a camp of armed guards. Following a series of misunderstandings, Charlie and Mike are chased by a croc monster until Kong appears and eats it. The boys reunite with Annie, who now rides a dog monster she bonded with over the 10-year period she was stranded on a second, unknown but far less hostile Monster Island. Cap and Irene encounter a giant hawk monster, and Irene sets up a trap for Annie that gets Dog captured by Hawk and taken far away so that they can secure her without being killed by her pet monster. The plan works, but ends with Charlie being captured by the Hawk as well and taken to a massive temple where Kong lives. Charlie and Dog make their way back to camp while Mike falls ill from poison left in his system by the sea monster. Irene then reveals that she's Annie's mother and has spared no expense hiring people to search for her daughter. A pack of Nightboy gremlins attack, and Dog and Irene's soldiers save the day, leading to a big reunion. Realizing that there's no way off the island without killing the sea monster, Charlie forms a plan to trick Kong into battling the creature to the death. In a flashback episode, we learn that shortly after the events of Kong Skull Island, Kong and his friend, a Spanish native who lives with a tribe on a beach, used to go on many adventures together. The two had an incredibly close connection, as does Kong with the Hawk creature, who brings Kong tributes for food. One day, Kong and Hawk discover a camp of killer chameleons. Despite the natives' protests, Kong attacks the lizards, drawing their attention to the girl and leading to an intense battle. Kong and Hawk barely save the native, causing her to lash out at Kong, leaving him behind. That night, while healing his wounds, Kong's blood awakens the Kraken, the sea monster that lives off the coast of Skull Island. The Kraken attacks and kills the tribe, including Kong's friend. Kong takes her necklace as a way to honor her and places it in his temple, where it sits for decades. Back in the 90s, Charlie and Annie ride Dog into Kong's temple, where they steal his necklace and lure him to the beach where the Kraken is hiding. Charlie is separated from Annie and captured by the iwi from Kong Skull Island, who reprimand him using the English they learned from Hank Marlowe for what he's done to Kong. This causes Cap and a very sick Mike to wander into the woods in search of Charlie, where they are attacked by a giant centipede that they have to fight off. Mike collapses and Cap carries him into the woods. Kong chases Annie to the beach and is attacked by the Kraken, kicking off an epic and extended final battle that lasts for nearly 10 minutes. Now fully revealed to be a Lovecraftian creature, the Kraken and Kong have an ever-evolving fight that takes Kong to the ocean floor in his first canonical undersea fight. Using his speed and skill as a fighter, Kong defeats the Kraken and then tears it in half to ensure its death, throwing its body to the shoreline. The Kraken's body crashes down in the ocean, causing a tidal wave to wash away everyone on the shoreline, and results in Annie cracking her head on a rock, making her pass out for 2 weeks. When she comes to, she's in a hospital with her mother. The underlying implication is that they were the only two to escape the island. With no guarantee of a season 2 and an ever-growing ominous silence from Netflix, it seems this is where the journey will come to an end. All viewers have now is an incredibly rushed and abrupt cliffhanger that leaves them with more questions than answers. What happened to the remaining survivors? Is Mike alive? What does Sam mean when he says he knows exactly what it's like to see his kid attacked by a monster? What happened to Charlie and the Iwi? Did Dog drown? Who were Irene's men and why were they harvesting organisms on Skull Island? What was the strange pit that supposedly makes you sick? Why did Irene know about Hollow Earth? What Titan did Cap see all those years ago? And what is the deal with Annie's second Monster Island and how many other Monster Islands exist? All we know so far is that season 2 wasn't going to connect to the Godzilla side of the universe in any way. There would be no Monarch or Apex. There would be no Godzilla or any of the Titans from his side of the universe. The story would follow Kong, poisoned by the Kraken, having to take on a brand new threat multiple times throughout the season, which deals entirely with the Hollow Earth without ever actually taking us to it. The Skull Island anime is a strange experiment for the MonsterVerse that, from all looks of things, didn't work out as they were intended. Seeking to gain a new audience on Netflix with the show aimed at teens, the show released without much fanfare or buzz. The most unfortunate part is, the show's actually pretty decent. Initially pitched as a prequel to Kong Skull Island, the series was moved to after the events of that film and before the events of the sequel comic Skull Island: The Birth of Kong. This is a decent setting for the show, as it allows them to tell fresh stories with King Kong and Skull Island while keeping them semi-modern but not bumping into established canon. As a King Kong adventure, Skull Island is actually a pretty good time. The show moves at a deliberate pace that is fairly slow for an animated series, but isn't so slow that it feels bogged down by filler. The only episodes that should have been condensed are episodes 3 and 4, which spend too much time rehashing the same college drama, developing the relationship between the kids too slowly, and having conflicts that don't support their own episodes. Other than these 2 episodes, which are still mostly good, the series moves at a fantastic pace that feels both cinematic and perfect for TV. The character writing is this show's strong suit, with all of the characters having interesting and defined personalities. The interpersonal conflict and human drama and emotional beats really resonate. It's impressive how dedicated the show is to getting the audience invested in the human story. This grounds the series with a sense of stakes that is enhanced by the series continuing the sense of danger lurking around every corner started in Kong Skull Island. This is a wonderfully fleshed out ecosystem of new monsters and super species that are constantly revealing themselves. While some monsters like the killer chameleons are too alike their real world counterparts to be all that exciting, other creatures like the aloe turtle, night boys, rock bugs, and vine snakes feel perfectly integrated into Skull Island's flora-fauna ecosystem. The Kraken is a cool monster as well, creating interesting challenges for Kong to overcome. The Kraken's many tentacles and tendrils outnumber Kong. The Kraken's sheer size makes it easy for the creature to overwhelm him. Its electric shock abilities and ability to breathe underwater give it the advantage in battle. This forces Kong to be more creative and reliant on his skills and sheer strength to win the fight. This is also a unique fight in the MonsterVerse, in that it doesn't feature any human intervention to aid the heroic Titan at all, making it even more satisfying when Kong's able to continue the MonsterVerse's trend of having a gruesome finisher move to the final opponent. Skull Island's biggest downfall and most unforgivable sin is its lack of attention to detail and, at times, genuinely horrible world building. While this show truly is a very fun King Kong adventure and is leaps and bounds the best animated King Kong project, it is a very poor entry to the MonsterVerse. Other than a few returning creatures, this show is almost entirely unconnected to that universe. The Iwi appear but are redesigned and recharacterized to be very different than how they appear in all other MonsterVerse entries, and other than a few throwaway references to the events of the 2017 film, such as a line about people flying in machines that visited the island, a downed sea stallion appearing, and a soldier who we never met before talking about the events of the 1973 expedition in a flashback, the series doesn't fit into the broader canon at all. From broad story strokes like Kong's radically altered characterization in his flashback episode to little details like the soldier giving an offhanded mention to the gray fox being the thing that got the 1973 survivors off the island rather than the 3 extract choppers the film implies saved them, this show gets so much wrong. Kong was seen living in Skull Mountain in the 2017 film as a lonely, reflective, and mature god. In this series, he has a different favorite mountain he sits on with his native friend, a preference towards a Spanish village rather than his distant presence with the Iwi, an enormous temple he lives in, and a hawk friend that scouts for him, aids him in battle, and feeds him. The flashback episode is truly the one that kills this entire show as an entry of the MonsterVerse, as it throws too much out the window and changes too much so that it doesn't fit into the universe at all. Kong's bond with the native undoes everything that was special about his connection to Gia. The fact Kong is friends with this native during the events of Kong Skull Island, a film that presents Kong as being so lonely that he tears up upon first contact with a human, and a movie that makes makes it clear Kong will not allow himself to get close to any humans doesn't make any sense. Kong's ability to understand Spanish also feels incredibly out of place. This series takes Kong from being a mature and noble warrior and turns him into a prankster who will recklessly make decisions that jeopardize his human friend out of spite. The more you watch this series and the more MonsterVerse entries that are released since, the more it becomes clear that there is no guiding principle for Phase 2 of this universe. There is no hand on the wheel making sure each entry is consistent in quality, story, canon, or even purpose at all. This show has other issues as well, such as its animation style and, at times, art design. The backgrounds and environments are so well detailed and beautiful that they contrast harshly with the simplistic characters who are often animated at different frame rates than their backgrounds during moving shots. This results in characters sliding around the screen in moments that feel awkward and cheap. The design for Kong and the Kraken also don't work. Kong looks nothing like his MonsterVerse self, aside from the scars. And the Kraken's mustache and Megamind head are distracting and laughable, and again feel out of place in the broader MonsterVerse. Not to mention, the MonsterVerse already had an established Kraken Titan in the form of Nakika. This show also has a very hard time nailing down its sense of scale with Kong, especially in the flashback episode being drawn at times to be about the size of the classic 50-foot portrayal of the character, rather than the 100+ feet he was after Kong Skull Island. The only other real issues that weigh this series down as a whole are the repetitive dialogue that gets incredibly tired after a while, and Annie and Dog's characterizations. While the fun banter can be quite charming, it can also become a burden for the series, wearing the viewer out with constant bickering, complaining, and arguing. And the plot twist reveal that the mercenaries were actually hired to protect Annie and were all massacred on a beach by Dog and Annie make them incredibly unlikable characters. Annie's bratty personality weighs her down throughout the entire series, and this reveal makes her nearly unjustifiable. Claiming she grew up on a monster island she doesn't know better doesn't excuse killing innocent people the second they show up, especially with how well adjusted she is outside that fact, and the fact that she spent 7 years in society before this. Finally, much like Kong, Dog is overhumanized to a suspension of disbelief breaking level. Even in a movie like Godzilla Kong the New Empire, which presents the great apes as more of people than gods, monsters, or even animals, Dog wouldn't work as is without some adjustments. Because this is supposed to be a part of the MonsterVerse, a dog Muto that is clearly able to understand English and is a human's pet doesn't work. And to say that because this is an animated project, the monsters need to be anthropomorphized more doesn't hold up when you look at series like Godzilla Singular Point, Neon Genesis Evangelion, or even the MonsterVerse comics. On the whole, Skull Island is a pretty mixed bag. The show is a fun King Kong adventure with likable characters, fun monsters, and fantastic emotional beats. Moments like Kong's discovery of the destroyed village and his horror at the death of his friend are super well handled and effective. The soundtrack is wonderful, the shot composition and world are fantastic. The animation by Powerhouse Animations doesn't always hold up the way it's intended, but on the whole looks pretty good, especially the environments. This series is filled with memorable characters who are fun and engaging, with only a few missteps such as overemphasizing things like the college drama and overplaying Annie's personality to near unforgivable levels. The show presents a fun world of monsters who are just a little too humanized to fit into the rest of the MonsterVerse, which represents the show's biggest issue. This project does not work well in the context of the rest of the universe it's set in, and should be turned into a fun, non-canon adventure inspired by the MonsterVerse without affecting it, much like Godzilla Awakening. I really like the Skull Island anime, and I would love to see it continue for a second and final season. I wouldn't want to see it go on beyond that unless they make it clear it is a non-canon adventure, but this is still a fantastic King Kong story that can satisfy both hardcore Kong fans and fantasy adventure fans. While I wouldn't recommend this series to Godzilla fans or hardcore MonsterVerse fans who care about continuity, I would gladly shout this out to softcore MonsterVerse fans, King Kong fans, and fantasy adventure fans, especially ones who like animated media. As always, I would like to thank everybody for watching this video. If you want to support this channel, please consider supporting the Patreon through the link in the description below. By supporting the Patreon, that is the most direct way to support this channel and to make sure that I can continue to make videos like this for you. If you want to get early access to content, including all of my upcoming MonsterVerse May reviews, access to the Discord community, and more, please consider supporting the Patreon. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I will see you guys next time for the next one. D-Man, out.